I'm Carol Klein, and this is my home, Glebe Cottage. When I'm not presenting or writing about gardening, this is where I spend most of my time, and where I've been honing my horticultural skills for 40 years. Whether you've got a spacious plot, a tiny patio, or a few window boxes, there's nothing more exciting and satisfying than creating your own garden. From basic to more advanced techniques, I believe anyone can learn how to do it. Whether you're a complete novice or an experienced gardener, I want to help you develop the skills to make your garden grow. I'm ready. Are you? Hello and welcome to my garden at Glebe Cottage here in North Devon. If you're wondering why I'm speaking a bit more quietly than usual, it's because it's early in the morning. I'm seeing plants in a completely different light. It's just glorious. And the whole garden is just twinkling. You're going to come for a wander with me. As the earth revolves, the light in our gardens changes constantly, both throughout the day and through the seasons too. There's a term in Italian, it's often used in art. It's chiaro scuro. Chiaro being the light, oscuro the dark. And at this time of day, that's exactly what you get in your garden, this contrast between those deep, deep shadows and this bright, low light. The whole garden is scintillating. Round every twist and turn, as the light changes, you see new pictures, and you're aware of different combinations of plants that you never really realised were quite so beautiful. In this bed, which is raised way off the ground, I've planted quite a lot of tall stuff, a lot of big gingers with these huge paddle-shaped leaves. You can see all the veins within them, and you can see the fennel. This fine filigree right through those leaves too. But then, with a completely different texture, look at this lobelia tuber. Look at that in the light, isn't it just glorious? While some plants like these need full sun to thrive, others prefer a shadier spot. This bed is in completely flat light at the moment. There's no direct sunlight shining on it. And that's wonderful because it really gives you a chance to appreciate just what's happening here. This lovely combination right the way through of green and white. These beautiful astrantias, Hattie's pincushion, with their quivering stamens. You can really see all the detail and providing this dramatic backdrop to the whole scene is this lovely cornice. This is Cornus Norman Haddon. Isn't it delightful? It too has green flowers, but these are the flowers contained in the centre of these big white bracts. It's lovely to see some parts of the garden in full sun, but I really don't want the sun to shine over here. I want to appreciate it just like it is. My woodland garden is also in deep shade at the moment. In the spring, before the new leaves unfurl, this is a very different scene. But now, in just a couple of months, how things have changed. The canopy's filled in overhead. All those green leaves are meeting each other. And when you walk through here, you almost feel as though you're swimming in this sea of green. It's just a delight. But it's not just the sights in the garden that have changed. It's also the scents. This is a wonderful example. This is a viburnum that I put in many, many years ago. It's not the most elegant of shrubs, perhaps, but I just adore it because it's at this time of year. All across its branches are scattered these bunches of tiny, creamy white flowers. So pretty. But of course, the best thing about them is a scent. It's glorious, it's honeyed. One plant above all is prized for its fragrance, but you won't usually find it in the deep shadows of a woodland dell. Its scent epitomises summer. It is, of course, the rose. This is a rose called Lady Emma Hamilton. I think she's gorgeous. Every time I come past, I cannot resist just taking a flower down and... It's famed for its scent, renowned for it. When modern breeders started producing roses without any scent, everybody complained because scent is the be-all and end-all of roses, really. It's a pure summer's day. I can't stop to smell the roses for too long, though. There's work to be done to keep my blooms in peak condition. To make sure that any plant, but especially roses, keep producing flowers, then you must constantly deadhead, taking off the old flowers. Otherwise, the plant just tries to make seed. Once a plant has made seed, in the case of this, rose hips, then it'll cease to flower because it's actually achieved its function. It's all about the next generation. So, despite the fact that this rose seems so forgiving, I'm going to smack it first of all and just take off any old petals like that. I haven't touched these beautiful flowers on the outside, but now I can see clearly what I'm doing. All those flowers are finished, so I can come back down this stem and cut just above a leaf. You don't want to leave a great big chunk sticking out because that might rot and absolutely ruin the rose. And what this is going to do, hopefully, more buds will form on the inside of these leaves and eventually they'll produce flowers. Here's a good example, look. All those flowers have come out, fallen to the ground, all their petals, but already there's a new shoot forming there and it's got buds on it too, so just a nice sloping cut just above. The reason you make a sloping cut rather than cutting straight across is because it helps any rain run off it, so the stem's in no danger of rotting. Roses really are the epitome of summer. So if you love your roses, and who doesn't, then you want to give them the kind of care they need to make them the very best they can. And next, there's no better way to learn about what roses really need to thrive than to look at how they grow in the wild. What a beautiful, breathtaking sight this is. Roses growing as they really should. This is our own wild dog rose, Rosa canina. Isn't it beautiful? And it grows practically anywhere where it's got something to scramble up. It loves growing along a hedgerow like this, right from the sunniest position all the way through to fairly dense shade. You often see it at the edge of woodland too. And if you examine just one flower, beautifully simple, 5 petals. Each petal is heart-shaped, and then at its centre, all these golden stamens, a positive powder puff of stamens. And of course they're not there for decoration, they're there with a purpose. And that purpose is to form a relationship with all those pollinating insects. And then later on, after they've departed and the petals have fallen, they'll all turn to hips and the birds will feast on them all autumn and right into the winter. I want to plant a rose in my woodland garden, echoing how many wild roses like this grow in their natural habitat among the dappled shade of the plants around them. Oh, that's better. It's lovely in the shade because it really is a boiling hot day. Now, most roses we grow in a really sunny position, but there are quite a lot of roses, especially wild shrub roses that actually are woodland plants or edge of woodland plants. So they manage perfectly well. In fact, they're completely at home in a shady position. And this is one of them, called Rosazanthina canary bird. Its other name is Manchu rose. It comes from China and Korea, and it grows in similar sort of shady positions to this one. Not necessarily in gardens, of course, but out in the wild. Where I want to plant it, of course, there's all sorts of competition. There are lots of tree roots. I've snipped a few of them back too, but also a great mass of leucojum. It's Leucojum aestivum, and it's the summer snowflake, although we saw it flowering in the spring. Glorious, these tall, white, elegant flowers. But I've taken out a mass of the bulbs and I'm going to replant them somewhere else too. So I think the two will live happily side by side. But before I do anything else, I want to water the whole because it's really important. The position under a tree like this is extremely dry. Already watered the rose well in its pot. Really important before you're planting something like this. No, should mean I get covered in mud, of course, just for a change. And I'm going to add a bit of really good compost. It's lovely stuff, this. I'll just scatter a bit in the soil that I'm going to add back, and I'll put a little bit around the edge of this hole. And then my rose. And if you look at this, you can see the graft here. So there's a rootstock under here, and then this piece has been grafted on the top, the variety, and that's how lots and lots of roses are grown. So very gently taking this out of here. I think I'm just going to lower it into this hole. I think it needs to be just a little bit deeper than that. Where can I put it where it's going to be stable? That's it. So I'll just dig a little bit more out of here. I don't need to loosen the roots of that because they're not going round and round. If they were, I would. Oh, we're down to my clay. So I'll just break up the bottom of this and incorporate a bit of that compost with it. So the moment of truth, I'm just going to lower it down. I'm putting this big strong shoot so it goes up the hill like this. So I'm going to return the soil now, mixed with that compost. Pull it all back, right the way around. Oh, sorry, Rose. I don't know why I'm apologising to the rose, because it's much better armed than I am. Actually got me then. It's quite interesting, this whole thing about roses and their thorns, because they're not really thorns at all. They're actually modified stems and they're prickles. And the whole raison d'etre for those prickles is that most roses in the first place initially evolved from plants that grew high up into the trees. So they use those prickles to actually, like crampon, to actually dig into the trees and help them right up into the sunlight. Because of course their flowers needed the sun. If you don't have flowers, you don't have the next generation. No, you just want to make sure that this is completely firmed in. No air pockets in between. I've planted it very deliberately so that that graft is just about that high off the ground. Now there's a lot of discussion about whether or not you bury the graft or whether it's actually above ground level, and I like to plant all my roses so that the graft is above the ground because they're grafted onto a completely different rootstock. The rootstock is strong, it's really vigorous, it means that your rose gets off to a flying start. But it's so strong that if it gets half a chance, it'll take over, and that means it'll send up suckers. Usually a wild rose and something that you don't particularly want. What you want is your variety. So you want, as far as possible, to prevent it from making those suckers. I think that's really happy. I think it's lovely. I'm looking forward to all those beautiful single yellow flowers. And I'm going to water this every single day for the next couple of weeks because I want it to get properly established. And we're having such fine weather at the moment, it's unlikely to get watered in by the rain, especially not here where it's overhung by all these trees. Are you happy? I think it is. There you go. Roses have a long and intriguing history. From fossil records, we can deduct that roses were on the planet 35 million years ago, give or take a million years. And our wild rose, the one we've just visited, Rosa canina, the dog rose, is just one of more than 100 different species of roses scattered all over the northern hemisphere. And all the roses we grow in our gardens today have descended from those 100 or so species. Roses lend themselves to hybridisation. There must be more than 30,000 different varieties of roses, and counting, because every year new ones are introduced. Hybridisation is where two different roses have been crossed to produce a new variety. But with so many to choose from and more being created each year, how do you decide which rose you want in your garden? A good start is to narrow it down to one of the three major groups of roses. For a start, there are ramblers that grow high up into the trees, and to grow them successfully you really do need a gigantic host for them to climb and wend their way up. But one of the categories of roses that most of us can grow in our own gardens is climbing roses. So they can be grown on walls, up trellises, on pergolas, just as I have grown these two here. And one of the loveliest things about growing climbing roses is that you can train them to make sure that they flower from the bottom right up to the top. And that means that you always have roses at nose level. But the major category of roses, ones that so many of us grow, are the shrub roses. The versatile shrub rose is a key element of so many gardens. I love this rose. It's just gorgeous. That's why I've planted so much of it. It's running all the way through this bed. It's called Rosa William Lobb. It's a moss rose. It's magenta when it starts off, but then gradually, it turns to almost violet, almost blue. And it tones beautifully well with this geranium stamen in the foreground, but also we've planted loads of cosmos, just annuals grown from seed this year, and we've tried to ensure that they tone beautifully with the rose. Back in the spring, I pruned all these roses. I went through the lot of them, and the whole idea was to remove any dead, diseased wood that was there. There wasn't much of it, but also to open them up, because ideally when you're growing shrub roses, if you can keep the centre of the shrub open, it ensures that the sunlight gets in there. You don't get these crossing branches, and it allows the flowers to display this beautiful deportment. Don't they just look so graceful here? And of course you can appreciate every single one of them. Oh, just lovely. How about this gorgeous rose? This is Rosa rosamundi. It's a form of the Gallica rose, a rose that was found right the way through Europe, from France, right the way across to Turkey. More than a year ago, I added to my display of rosamundi when I planted some bare root ones. And you can see why I wanted more of them. Aren't they gorgeous? I think it's the most lovely rose. A simple, straightforward shrub rose, easy to keep, really easy to prune. You hardly need to prune it at all. I just love to see them surrounded by all these beautiful flowering perennials. Gilenia trifoliata with those dancing tiny white flowers, related to roses actually. They're in mixed company because that's what roses love. If you think about wild roses, how do they grow? They grow amongst lots of other plants, amongst grasses and other flowers, and that's exactly how we grow our roses here. It's just a beautiful relationship. Next, we'll meet some other members of the extended rose family as I take my fruit trees in hand. The rose, be it shrub, climber or rambler, is the most recognisable member of the family of flowering plants known as Rosaceae. But there are thousands more. We've looked at so many roses, but at my feet is another member of the rose family. It's Alchemilla mollis. Isn't it wonderful how it's self-seeded? And it's like a sort of triumphant walkway through. Every time you come through here, you just feel grand, and you feel as though it's put itself there just for you. To see it on a dry day like this, you understand why it's called Alchemilla mollis. Mollis just means soft, and its leaves are as soft as anything. But on a damp day, when it's been raining, water gathers in the centre of each leaf, and all around the edge it twinkles. It's a completely magical plant. This prolific self-seeder is drought tolerant and will even grow in patches of gravel. So it's ideal for softening the edges of paths and walls, spilling over with its lovely frilly leaves. Each individual flower is tiny, but they make these gorgeous heads of soft, soft flowers, almost like clouds. And they mix so wonderfully well with other things, especially with hardy geraniums. Just look at it here with this soft pink geranium oxonianum. They're just made for each other. But then you turn round and look on this corner, completely different picture, different geranium. Really deep, dark, velvety purple geranium nodosum. Now that plant can be a thumping nuisance sometimes, but just here, with the Alchemilla, it's absolutely perfect. And the rose family provides a feast both for the eyes and for the taste buds. I suppose roses are the most obvious member of the family Rosaceae, but there are lots and lots of others too, including loads of our fruit. Well, this is one of only 2 apple trees in my garden. It's a Cox's orange pippin, and every branch is endowed with this huge crop of fruit. Now, there's a thing called a June drop, where a tree will actually drop lots of its fruit because it's just bearing too much. If this tree kept all its fruit, these branches would bend down. There's a possibility that they might snap too. Well, this apple is very reticent about doing that. Sometimes it hangs on to all its fruit, and they're very, very small and a bit disappointing. So I'm going to help this one out by thinning some of these, just to make sure that the apples that are left will really swell and be hugely edible. I'm going to help it on its way, and the first thing I'll do is just look along here for anything that just didn't set. Just these little dead ones that never made it in the first place, down through there. And then I'm going to look at each little group. Now they're on short spurs, which are these little side shoots. This one, for instance, has just one apple, so it should be able to manage that. Whereas here, there are 3 altogether. So no way you're going to get 3 decent-sized apples out of that. So I want to select one of these, and I'm going to go in here and cut it off smartly and sharply. I don't want to leave any snags behind, because then they've got the potential to rot. And just try and leave the biggest, so that in each little group there's just one apple that's going to fatten up. Now I think I'll leave that one. Look at that, that's a potential to be a big bonny apple. I want to do exactly the same thing to them. So again, in here, take it off with its little stem. I suppose the difference between this and deadheading the roses is, with the roses you don't want them to make fruit, you don't want them to make hips. So you take those off as soon as the petals have fallen. But in this case, you absolutely want that fruit. Lots of it, but all of a decent size. If you're short on outdoor space, a mighty huge apple tree might not be for you, but you can still enjoy fruit in your garden. Isn't it grand when your veg really start growing? And I've already eaten a couple of courgettes too. So far, this bed is all about veg, but I want it to be a fruit and veg bed. And to that end, I'm going to put in this lovely espaliered pear. It's a conference pear. Now, obviously, I haven't got room for a huge tree here, and lots of other people haven't either. But this is a method of growing a fruit tree in a limited space. Instead of letting a fruit tree naturally branch out in all directions, an espalier tree is trained to grow only along one plane. It's a method that's been practiced for years and years, centuries really, in big walled gardens and manor houses, where this is just one of the ways of training fruit, usually against a wall. Here we go. It's quite substantial, isn't it lovely? Look at that, with its arms outstretched like that. It's been already trained. You can do it just initially and train it yourself, but then it's cheaper, but it takes much, much longer. We're off to a flying start with this one. Now, what's happened to this tree? Up this stem come, its top has been taken out, which has made these 2 side shoots come out, and they've been trained right along the branches. Another leader has taken over and become this shoot here. When it got to this stage, the process was repeated, the top nipped out, and those 2 trained across. But what I want to do is have 3 tiers, so I'm going to try and do that now. But first of all, I'm going to plant it. Right, here goes. I'm actually going to lift it up. I'm batting the cercis tree. Oh, I think that's pretty good. Now this hole I've dug, I want it at right angles. I really like all my lines parallel. So I'm going to go right round that square and just push it in and use all my mighty weight to make sure it's in intimate contact with the soil. They're dead handy, these, because you can get your head through and see what you're doing on the other side. Look at that. And if you want to know if it's firmly in there, just give it a little tug. It's not going anywhere at all. I think that's looking good, really. But so far, somebody else has done all the training of this tree. Now it's my turn. So although this has put these two shoulders out sideways here and made these tiers, it's still growing up. This is the leader. All plants have a thing called apical dominance. That just means that the tallest shoot in the centre is always going to head for the sky. It's the strongest of the lot. Well, I'm going to have to stop it doing that if I want it to go out sideways. So what I'm going to do is I want to measure about the same sort of distance up here. So I've got fairly equal spacing, and I want to choose two buds, two little shoots that are going out sideways at about that sort of height. Obviously, they've got to be on both sides. And they're the ones which are going to become the shoulders. The next tier up. What I want to do is not snip right above them, because in that case I haven't got the possibility of making a fourth tier up here. So what I want to do is go up from those shoots, leave a couple of buds there and actually take it out here and cut just above a bud. Now this will eventually become another leader, but not until those two have started to grow sideways. There's just one more job to do here. I want to remove anything on this trunk. Now I can do it just with my snips, because I want to end up with bare trunk here too. So just carefully into the side there. I mustn't cut off the ones I want to train in, must I? I should have marked them. There. Here, can you see already I've got a little bare trunk? So that's it. It's relied on these bamboo canes so far, but now I've got to give it a proper structure. So I'm going to ask Neil if he'll give me a hand putting in some posts, putting some wires across and training it in. I should get a crop from this next year, but meanwhile, let's make sure it gets properly established. If you'd like to try your hand at training an espalier tree, the first step is to measure out an equal distance to your new tier. Then identify two side shoots to become the new tier. And when it comes to cutting, snip above the new tier, leaving two extra shoots to spare, so that you can take your espalier to the next level. I'll have to wait patiently to taste my new pears, but there's plenty of other fruit in the garden to be going on with. These strawberries have only been in for just over a year, but they're absolutely thronged with fruit. There are masses of them. Neil's already made one lot of jam, but it was a bit runny, but this time it's going to be perfect because I've got all these apples to use just to increase the pectin, and they'd be ideal to make sure it sets. But before I actually pick them and take them indoors, I just want to taste one. I really wish I could share it with you. It's gorgeous. And look at these white flowers. Exactly like a single rose. Because, of course, strawberries belong to Rosaceae. That family is just so wonderful, isn't it? Beauty, delicious taste, it's got the lot. There's another delicious edible relative of the rose that does well in my garden, although some of these have popped up behind my back. I need to beat my way through here. I could hardly believe this when I saw it, but here's proof positive. This is supposed to be my blackcurrant bed, but up have come these glorious yellow raspberries. Look at these, full of fruit. But I have never, ever planted one here. So I presume what's happened is that blackbirds have consumed some of the raspberries over here. They've wiped the beaks on here and some of the seeds have fallen to the ground, or they've come out the other end with a bit of local fertiliser. I can't imagine any other way they could have got here, but they obviously absolutely love it in this shade. And when you see the flowers, they're typically rosaceae, 5 petals, but it's said that they actually attract moths. Moths may be their pollinators, and moths in their turn attract bats, and we do have bats here. Wonderful. If you want a steady supply of soft fruit, it's best not to rely on the snacking habits of blackbirds. So next, I'm going to show you how to grow your own. An abundant summer garden is so rewarding, especially if you've grown some of it from your own seeds or from cuttings. And today I'm going to take some from my blackcurrants. So this is the blackcurrant that I want to take cuttings from. There are loads of different varieties of blackcurrants. Lots of them begin with Ben, because lots of them are Scots. And of course, soft fruit, especially things like blackcurrants and raspberries, absolutely thrive in Scotland. The further north they are, the better. They really appreciate a cold winter. So I'm going to move to this shoot. This is quite soft at the top, but down here, where it's getting much sturdier, I'm going to cut just above a leaf like that. I mean, this is what you're after, nice sturdy growth like this. Again, hold those leaves up so you can see what you're doing and cut just into this woody stuff. Nice, brilliant cutting that will make. So I've just filled some pots with nice gritty compost. Now these are pretty gigantic at the moment, but with each one, I'm going to start off this time by actually nipping out the top. Now, some people, when they're taking cuttings that have got big leaves, actually reduce the leaf. I never do, because I think they need whatever moisture is in there to actually take root anyway, because you've deprived your cutting of its usual source of moisture, which is the roots. So, right, I've taken the top out of there, and then I'm just going to remove that leaf, probably take this one off too. So I've got a nice chunk of clean stem there, and then right round the edge of here. Now these are sturdy enough to be able to push them in just up to the bottom leaf on the stem. So there's about this much stem under the surface of the compost. And then just repeat the same procedure. I think I can probably only get 3 at the most in here. And then, as per usual, great big handful of grit on the top, just to make sure that compost under there stays nice and moist. I'll give these a really good soak, and I'll spray them every so often, put them with the rest of my cuttings, out of direct sun, but in a nice bright place. I hope they'll have rooted in about 4 to 6 weeks with a bit of luck. And at that stage, I'll turf them out of the pots, pot them individually, and by next spring, because I've got no room myself anyway, but I'll be able to give them away, because who doesn't love blackcurrants? Fruit for your table and a sensory banquet for your boarders. Roses themselves can fulfil so many roles. I've been longing to create more height in the garden by adding a striking arch that will be, one day, smothered in the fragrant blooms of climbing roses. Isn't it just wonderful to be actually using these again? True recycling. Not for another wedding, of course. And to do that, Neil's going to help me recycle a feature that first appeared at a family wedding. This might look like a bit of old copper plumbing pipe, but that's exactly what it is. About 4 years or so ago, Neil built this most wonderful arch for our youngest daughter Alice's wedding. It was just beautiful. It was a bit sort of impromptu. But it really, really worked. It was draped with hydrangeas and glorious September flowers. We're going to reinstate it in here. It's wonderful to actually be able to recycle it. And of course, it's in Alice's garden, and it'll always remind us of that wonderfully happy day. So the other one starts there.
Yeah.
So if it goes just around the back there is some soil, Neil. No, well, there is. You're bound to have plants growing through it, but that doesn't matter, does it?
No.
Does it?
No, that's good.
I don't think so. Thanks, love. Cheers. Ooh, I've been waiting for this moment because the arch is almost complete. And this is the rose I'm going to grow up here. It's a climbing rose called New Dawn, and it's got very special memories for me. I remember this in our back garden. It was more of a backyard in Manchester. And on the way to the coal shed, that's going back a bit, isn't it? There was a blackened fence and this rose was growing up it, and I always used to love it. And what I loved particularly was the way it smelt, because it's got this soft appley scent. It's also a brilliant rose because it's got very glossy, clean foliage, and it's always smothered in flowers. The buds are sort of perfect. And this is the rose that's going to go over the other side and join New Dawn in the middle. It's called Starlight Symphony. It doesn't look very symphonic at the moment, simply because the deer came along, and while it was standing outside over there, they've chomped the top of all these shoots. How can deer love roses so much when they're so prickly? But perhaps they just eat all those nice tender little shoots. But it will recover. I'm going to take it as a pruning. All those little shoots will spring out. The whole thing will grow and join New Dawn in the middle here, and before you know it, the arch will be absolutely smothered in roses. And of course, at that point, you're just going to be surrounded by this scent. Because isn't that the main reason that most of us grow roses? I've got the most beautiful quote. It's from Shakespeare. It's Antony and Cleopatra, I think, so they must have been growing it then. The rose looks fair, but fairer we deem for that sweet odour which doth in it live. It's lovely, isn't it? All that remains is to plant these two beauties and wind them through the arch as they grow. But as Mark Antony could tell you, Rome wasn't built in a day. So much gardening's all about anticipation, isn't it? I can just imagine what this is going to look like later on. And in future years, you'll be able to wander in here. It's almost inviting you into the garden, or wander out and go to a different part of the garden. Next time, I'm showing you how and where to plant irises and gladioli. I actually really love heights. Going up in the world, as well as how to keep solid crops going all summer long. All these flowers will open and we'll have so many cucumbers we won't know what to do with them. Until then, bye-bye.
And Carol's back next Friday night at 7. What can't you say about the marvellous Maggie Smith? We've a celebration of her enduring and versatile career brand new tomorrow night at 9. Next tonight, putting that day trip from Marbella to Ronda in the shade. Jump aboard the Al Andalus for new world's most scenic railway journeys in just a moment.